Hey everyone, I am Miles from the future. This episode was actually recorded a few years ago. Jeff Meldrum has, of course, passed away since then, and so I just wanted to say thank you again to Jeff for coming on the show. This wasn't really a debate so much as a conversation between people who disagree. We were very thankful to have him on the show and thankful for all the work he did in trying to legitimize cryptozoology to the best of his ability. Of course, him and I disagree on a lot of stuff, and we disagree in this episode, but it was still great having him on. Also, this is a very early episode of the Plastic Plesiosaur podcast, so it's a little rough, the editing, the audio, and some of our questions aren't as sharp as we grow to be in the future. So please be mindful of that going forward, and thank you, and enjoy the discussion.
And now the part you've all been waiting for, our interview with Bigfoot phenomenon expert Jeff Meldrum. Trey and I had an excellent conversation with Jeff, and he was a real sport to come on our show. The interview, unfortunately, ended up being about 4 hours long, so I had to drastically trim it down to about 1:30. So a lot of anecdotes, arguments, and bits of evidence that Jeff made, or retorts that Trey and myself made, had to be removed. So if you're wondering about any increased context in any of the arguments or points we make, please see the greater video, which will be posted on my Patreon, Google Miles Grab, or my YouTube, again, just Google Miles Grab. All right, enjoy the interview. Yeah, we're really happy to have you on, Jeff, because, like, as I said in our emails, we've watched you growing up on Monster Quest and Nat Geo and all these other programs, and we definitely appreciate your more scientific, more analytical take on the Sasquatch phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, and that's why we're just really thankful to have you on.
Well, my pleasure.
Yeah. So just so people know a little background baseball, we lost a bit of the recording, so I'm going to do this part a little quicker here, just so we can get through this. But so I just wanted to ask Jeff Meldrum, things we agree on. We both agreed on the age of the Earth. We both agreed on, evolution describes speciation and diversification. We both agreed on the consensus opinion of the peopling of the Americas, about 30,000 years ago, possibly 100,000 years ago. And then we just started talking about all the different hominids and hominoid families, and how we both agree that complexity has kind of grown in our understanding, and we're kind of having to rewrite our understanding over time. So
Yeah,
kind of a summation of the discussion we had lost there, unfortunately. So I guess what I want to ask next, Jeff, is what is your actual hypothesis that's like falsifiable of what the Sasquatch phenomenon is? Not necessarily the culture phenomenon, but like the animal itself. Like, what's the falsifiable claim of, like, what do you think the animal is most likely to be?
Right. Well, and by falsifiability, I mean, if and when a sample lends itself to a thorough DNA analysis, that would be one test, one opportunity at falsification or verification, substantiation. Or if someone walks in with a jaw or a tooth, or a semi-truck hits one. But as far as the nature of what it is, I think I have two sort of working null hypotheses.
Okay.
And, one was suggested very early on by researchers such as John Green, who noted that that there was a known species, Gigantopithecus blacki, that was indeed in the right place at the right time and was the right size. We had limited understanding of just exactly what it is, because we have just jaws and teeth. I mean, at one time early on, because of the thick enamel on its molars, it was thought to be a hominid, rather relative. And somehow, the hominins went through a giant phase, and Weidenreich kind of championed that notion for a while. Now we know that enamel thickness is not just an either or, but it does seem to be a characteristic. Thick molar enamel does seem to be a characteristic of not only hominins, but some of the Asian apes, the Shivapithecines, and of which Gigantopithecus was probably a member of. So
They're definitely a fascinating animal.
It is, yeah. The
It's great that
potential,
we're able to
you know,
discover them.
and we, and it's also an interesting case study because here's an animal, a very large animal that existed in East Asia for 1.5 million years, and for all that tenure in that habitat, we have 2 jaws and a few thousand isolated teeth. And we only have them because porcupines dragged those scraps of skeleton into the caves, the limestone caves, where they became the remnants of after their gnawing became fossilized. Were it not for the action of the porcupines, we'd have virtually no record of Gigantopithecus. So this,
so conceivably, porcupines invented Bigfoot.
That's right. That could be. Yeah. So the other.
So we both. Oh, sorry, Trey. What do you have to say?
I was wondering. So I've heard competing like that. Back in the olden days, they believed Gigantopithecus would have walked upright, but I think they've since sort of gotten the idea that it would have been a quadruped. Does that still stand or
not so simply? There most anthropologists, even back at the time of Weidenreich and Koenigswald and those early paleontologists in Asia, would probably have, if pressed, would have said it was more likely that they exhibited characteristics like other great apes, and so on the ground they would have adopted a quadrupedal posture. I mean, it was thought that bipedalism was an exclusively hominin characteristic, and evolution was always considered very conservative. I mean, things did not happen very often in a convergent way. That view is very different now. We know that evolution produces similar solutions to common challenges sometimes from rather distinctive starting points.
Yeah, convergent evolution.
And those are fascinating cases, I think.
Definitely. Oh yeah. Like the eye has evolved many different times.
Right. And so now though, the notion that bipedalism may have evolved independently in something like a large terrestrial ape like Gigantopithecus isn't such a heretical statement anymore.
Sure. Yeah. So let me ask you a couple questions here. So I wanted to kind of gauge like your confidence intervals, right? Like, so I'll just ask you kind of like a few questions. Like, what do you think the likelihood of a couple things are?
Sure.
So I'm just going to use a different cryptid just because it's a good example. Not that cryptids are the only thing we're interested in or you are interested in. But say, so like the hypothesis that the Loch Ness Monster is a biological creature, like what would you put your confidence interval that claim was likely to be true?
Well, after the results of the recent eDNA analysis that was conducted, the survey conducted under the leadership of Dr. Neil Gemmell from New Zealand, suggesting that it may be some form of giant eel, I think there's a very good possibility that an explanation like that may lie at the root of at least many of the sightings.
The way I understood that paper wasn't so much that he suggested it was an eel. The paper just said there were eels, and then he was asked by journalists if he thought that eels could describe the phenomenon, and he kind of said, "I suppose."
Well, I guess I'm not privy to all of the publications or all of the dialogues, but that was the gist that I took with it. I've actually been in communication with him about the possibility of employing some eDNA approaches to some survey of North American habitat.
Yeah, I think that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, that would be. I would love to see that.
But so I guess we haven't turned our conversations real precisely to the outcome. I didn't see him offer any other explanation than that.
Fair enough. Let me just ask it this way. So like if I was asked the question, what is my confidence interval on, some kind of relic reptile being the Loch Ness Monster's answer, I would say it's approaching 0, way more nearing 0 than 1. Right. Would you be of this similar confidence interval?
I would. I've never attributed it as a relic plesiosaur or something horrible in that fashion.
I assume that was your opinion. I'm just trying to kind of like gauge, just so when we use words like probable or likely or possible, we kind of know what we mean, right?
Sure, of course.
Yeah. So like when you say like it's there's a certain probability that this animal that we don't know was bipedal, but the consensus seems to be it's quadrupedal. What do you think what's your confidence interval that it was bipedal?
Well, I'm not sure how to I'm not exactly sure how you're applying a confidence interval to.
So basically, like it's not 100% scientific in nature, because I'm asking you just kind of like, but if you say it's likely or possible, when you say likely, do you mean like 51% plus? Do you mean 30%? Just so I kind of understand.
If I use the word likely, then I would say yes. You'd be up in the 70% chance that is the case. Versus, if I say that it's possible, then I mean by that it's better than a 50-50 chance. So with this example, if an ape comes to the ground, there's two options. You either stand on two legs or you walk on fours. And so you could say, well, that might suggest, if you knew nothing else, you have a 50-50 chance of it being either upright or quadrupedal. Now, some would argue, but if you look at other existing apes, they are capable of facultative bipedalism, but they'd usually adopt a quadrupedal posture. That's hard to apply to.
Would it necessarily be a 50-50 chance? Isn't there presuppositions and
yes,
that there's likelihood? Because it's not a coin, right?
Exactly.
There's two answers.
That's what I'm saying. In the absence, that would be your starting point. So if we're talking about Gigantopithecus with an even more exaggerated body mass, if it had that morphology, if it had not evolved decidedly in the direction of a quadruped with a vertically oriented shoulder blade, for example, that lined up in a compressive manner at the shoulder joint with the humerus, then if it looked more like a gorilla with the shoulder blade on the back of the thorax, then it's much more likely that to spare that forelimb those shearing forces, it would adopt a more upright orthograde posture, even bipedalism.
So I mean, that sounds like a possible explanation. I mean, of course, one thing is, I'm not an expert on this particular topic. It is a topic of great interest to me. I took classes on it in college, but I don't have a degree in it, right? So you're an expert on that. The same with like the footprints, right?
Right.
That's an area where you have a certain expertise, and I don't mean this in any way dismissive way, but a certain amount of jargon that most people just can't really approach.
Sure.
So I've listened to some of your conversations, and one of my concern is a lot of the conversation gets into you saying that your expert opinion, for example, certain locomotion or certain footprints looks like what you would expect to see. And so you consider it to be a very high quality of evidence, but that can't really be examined by most other people. And we don't have a peer-reviewed paper in a large journal of you suggesting it. So it's kind of like this claim. Well, I mean, it's like an Anthropology or Nature or something we don't have, right?
Well, if you gauge all scientific understanding by science or nature, then you have a very parochial view of.
No, I understand there's many more journals.
That's like an elite club.
That's fair. That's very fair. I mean, I'm not saying you're not a good quarterback because you haven't won the Super Bowl, right? That sentence could sound like that.
I just wanted to say that there is a huge obstacle to publishing this kind of material in what you're calling mainstream journals, but it has.
Why is that?
Because it is unorthodox. Doesn't fit the quote, as you've used the word a number of times, consensus view. I mean, I was confronted by a colleague who literally, after refusing to or rejecting a solicited paper to the publication of the California Academy of Science, her only rationale, her only defense for that rejection was, and I'm quoting her verbatim, it can't exist, therefore it doesn't exist, and it doesn't matter what evidence he thinks he has. One of the explanations that was offered again when my abstract was rejected, there was no basis on the merits or the methodology. It was, this is a subject that isn't of general interest to the anthropological community.
Sure. Well, I mean, I guess that's I guess if their opinion is that the likelihood of it is so low, I could see that being reasonable. However,
absolutely not. You're gonna justify the acceptance or the consideration of a scientific question based on the general consensus of its likelihood of being true or not? I mean, that's the problem. That's the problem.
So you're suggesting there's a bit of a, I don't want to say conspiracy, but people in charge that don't like the direction of the material or the subject matter of the material?
Yeah, I'm not suggesting. I'm stating that.
Yeah.
I'm stating.
Well, you did. I mean, other discoveries, like we spoke about, other hominid discoveries that have changed the consensus in some way are getting published. And the reason is because they have perhaps better physical primary evidence.
Well, of course.
Do you think if you had that,
I'm not putting this on par with that.
Okay, that's fair. I assumed that was your opinion. I just wanted to make sure.
No, yeah, but when I go, submit a publication, I mean, these footprint casts exist. Example, and that was where my focus has been centered, and because that is my principal expertise. The footprints exist, and those few scientists who have come to the conclusion that there's something worthwhile to examine here were usually those who had the wherewithal to evaluate those footprints. Dr. John Napier, for example, in his book, one of the first to publish a book that, a scientific book or an academic approach to the topic by a primatologist, a bona fide primatologist, and his basis for concluding that it was very likely that something existed was on the basis of the footprints. Now, he was quite forthcoming in saying he doesn't know exactly what this is.
Yeah, naturally.
I mean, obviously, this is not conclusive evidence, and I've not, like I said, I'm not saying that any thing is on par with walking in with a fossil cranium, for example.
Yeah, because if you had a skull, I think we'd both agree that they would look at it, right?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Well, yeah.
So the opinion is that they don't value expert opinion on the footprints to the degree that you think would be reasonable, right?
Yeah. That's usually.
Yeah. So I can understand that being your opinion.
And I can understand how that must be frustrating.
Definitely. Yeah. If people are of the opinion that their honest expertise and honest assessments of it would not be respected because of a stigma, that's very unfortunate.
Yeah.
I would not want that to be true about any hypothesis, regardless of if I like the conclusion or not. And this is one I would possibly like the conclusion of, right?
Sure.
My kind of what I wanted to say though was like I really wanted to address what you thought the other explanations and evidence around this phenomenon were more than just the footprint.
Sure, absolutely.
Part of that is because you've spoken about it at length. People can definitely hear your opinion on that, right?
Sure.
So I kind of just wanted to give you that. Like, we accept that the footprints are interesting evidence.
Okay.
I think you would agree that they don't get us there, right? They're not a holotype. They don't prove it. We can't fully describe it, but they're compelling, interesting bit of evidence.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So like that. That's why I think we can agree. Like, okay, well, let's try to build from there. We'll just give you that.
Sure.
So like the earliest descriptions of this creature, then, like, if you go back to the 1920s, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have like the Ape Canyon incident.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, this gets counted as a Bigfoot case, but there's a supernatural part of it that was described at the time, which normally don't get described now. And this is true for many different Bigfoot cases, not necessarily other ones in the 20s, but there's a lot of different supernatural elements that normally when people like you and I, who are methodological naturalists, try to look at this topic, exclude. But do you think that makes it so that we're kind of biasing the anecdotal evidence that we're accepting into only this methodological method, which means that we're accepting evidence that we shouldn't?
Well, I think there is some danger, some potential for that kind of conscious or unconscious cherry picking. Yes, I'll give you that. I think though that if we hold our standards, and this is why I have focused primarily on the trace and physical evidence, the hair, the scat, the footprints, is because such claims of supernatural or paranormal often are purely anecdotal. They're very anomalous and singular personal experiences that aren't readily repeatable or repeated.
Yeah, definitely.
It seems if you make your bins generalized and broad enough, there seems to be repetition by other people experiencing them. But, it's like those times that I have looked into and pursued such claims from individuals, they don't bear up under any kind of scrutiny. I mean, for example, there's often claims of orbs, balls of light, a Bigfoot. And I had one person who was just very adamant, correspondence via email. And I asked this person, do you have any photographic documentation of your experience? Because I can't just accept them based on your description. And, oh, sure. And I said, well, send me your best example. And I always have to stress that because very frequently people will send me something. And if I'm critical of it, then they say, oh, well, I've got better pictures.
Yeah, well, why would I see those, right? Like I definitely give you a lot of respect for, like, example, we watched the episode 2 of Monster Quest, the Bigfoot attack episode, right?
Right.
Where it's like Bigfoot attacks this cabin, and then they have, you guys go searching for a bear who ate some blueberries, basically, right?
Right.
Or the nail board with the tissue or blood.
And obviously there's. I don't know if you would agree with this, but there's pressure of you to be on the show to say things are Bigfoot or maybe Bigfoot. If there's a 20% chance, somebody might say it's a 40% chance because they're on TV. But you said that it was a bear because that was your expert opinion.
Sure.
And you didn't you didn't say, well, it's probably a bear, but it could be Bigfoot. You said it's a bear. Yeah. And I thought that was, worthy of respect and kind of a nod to that. I thought that was good.
Thank you. Well, yeah, no, I always adhere to that, and the understanding is made quite clear at the beginning of any of those documentaries, and that the expectation is that I'm not edited out of context or juxtaposed with other statements that might imply that, and because you get broadsided. The work based recently was that one of the the pass up in Russia where
I heard about this.
And that for that documentary I had an in-lab interview that was your basic run-of-the-mill generic Sasquatch interview. It's just the same kinds of questions that I'm often confronted with. And then after the thing was done and the cameras were being packed away, the producer pulls out his iPhone. He says, oh, and by the way, as we were doing research, we came upon this really intriguing story, Dyatlov Pass. That was it, wasn't it? And he showed me these photos, including this. It always, whenever I see it, it looks like the Tin Man because it has such straight edges of a coat and pants and hat and so forth as it's stepping out of the forest, the tree line. And could this be a Bigfoot? And I said, well, I really don't think it is. But then when the documentary came out, that was the centerpiece of the whole story.
Oh, they edited you and just totally misleading.
And I want to point out that we will not do that to you.
I'm not saying, but that's always the kind of the two-edged sword aspect of participating in these kind of documentaries. And people often ask.
I would like to ask a question. This might change gears a little bit, but I'm an archaeology guy. I know a lot of colleagues that work in sort of cultural resource management, sort of the people you call when you're building a highway or buildings. And I just know that there's so many human remains and well-preserved human remains scattered all throughout the United States or in Canada and all around, where they're just there's just the sheer amount of them is amazing. You have like Kennewick Man and Anzac One and all kinds of fossil and more recent remains. For me, it's just kind of hard to jump on to to accept the belief, the possibility of belief in Bigfoot with the sheer lack of archaeological or paleontological evidence. The fact we haven't found any sort of non-human ape remains in the New World given the fact that Gigantopithecus and other examples, fossilization is rare, preservation is rare. I feel like even so, there would be exceptions that would fall in there. I don't know. I would just want to see why it is so hard to find a Bigfoot skeleton or remains over such a long period of time.
Then, to address your question head on, with an albeit apologist explanation. It's one that turns to the circumstances. Well, why would there be so few bones? I mean, should we expect to find more bones? And common denominators is the potential number. You talk about the high number of human remains. Well, if you compared the human population on this continent prior to European arrival, there were millions of people. I don't think there were ever more than several thousand Sasquatch. That's just the nature. Well, I shouldn't say I'm making an assertive statement.
At a certain time, or
conception of the
over
nature.
a long period of time.
Well, yes, over a long period of time. But even there, we're talking about a large-bodied hominoid, which probably has a life expectancy of pushing 50 years if we bracket with the life expectancy of humans and great apes, and recognize a positive correlation of longevity with body mass. So there's a slow turnover of individuals. I mean, it's like I won't go into the whole argument here, but based on a number of different lines of evidence and extrapolations, I would estimate, say here in my state of Idaho, or we could talk about Washington, because the potential habitat, the likely habitat, is actually fairly restricted even for Washington. We're talking about the Olympic Peninsula and the commencement of the coastal range, the Cascades, a little bit across the northern border with Canada, and that's about it. The rest of it,
the rainforests area, right?
So in all of, I would estimate that in all of Washington, at most, there's probably 300 to 400 Sasquatch to create a straw man based on those various variables that I kind of alluded to. But in comparison, there are about 25,000 black bear in Washington state. There's 35,000 in Idaho.
So let me ask this question. One thing that seems to me is the hypothesis is that basically there's a relict great ape, right? Like most likely a great ape, a fifth great ape, or maybe it's a very
early hominin like Paranthropus, say.
Yeah, so there's a hypothesis there's a relic version of this, and sometime during the Pleistocene they populated North America, right?
Okay.
Like that doesn't seem incredible on itself, right? Like that's a decent thing. We could both believe this happened. But when we keep adding more and more complexities to this, like, well, maybe they were bipedal, even though we don't know that. Maybe they were a lower population, because I mean, there's 26,000 grizzly bears in Canada right now. So we think that there's much less amount of grizzly bears, like when there was less people, and then they survived the different, comings and going of the ice age to the Pleistocene. They survived even though the Clovis and other people killed so much of the megafauna, and the megafauna rates are just dropping. They survived that. And then, so like the fact that they would have came, they would have done this, they would have done that, and then they're still alive. As you keep adding more and more complex things to their nature, it seems to me you make the hypothesis less and less likely, because you need more things to be true. A Bayesian reasoning would say that like everything you add makes it less likely. It doesn't mean not true,
right,
but less likely.
Right.
I'll let you respond in a second, Jeff, but it makes me feel like, have you ever heard the Carl Sagan bit where he talks about the dragon in the garage?
I'm not familiar with.
It's this thing whenever there's sort of a reported unknown or mysterious phenomena that there's always a sort of way for the dragon to escape scientific scrutiny. There's always an explanation or dodge for why there's not sufficient evidence for it yet. And Carl Sagan used the point that the answer would remain the same even if the dragon didn't exist. If it's a dragon that's able to avoid all those detection methods, then it might as well be a dragon that doesn't exist. And for some of the limited evidence that we do, maybe like dragon-sized footprints and flower reported, the explanation, there are alternate explanations for that. There could be fake footprints, or there could be other explanations. In his words, such evidence, no matter how important to dragon advocates, is far from compelling. Yeah, it's a sort of scale of evidence, I think, that there's other explanations for this, and for Bigfoot, there's other explanations for the footprints, I feel like. But yeah, you need DNA and you need some sort of extraordinary evidence for, I think, to convince a skeptic. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems like a moving target. Again, it's not that it couldn't be. Do you think it's more likely? Let me just ask you this question: do you think it's more likely Bigfoot did exist and was in North America at some time and now is extinct, or do you think it's more likely that he did exist and continues to exist?
Well, when I examine footprints that are extremely compellingly credible, just a year ago, a month ago, then it's hard to attribute those to a creature that might have existed, but is more likely extinct than not.
Well, let's leave out the footprints. I know you don't want to leave out the footprints. I'm not trying to straw man you by leaving them out.
But that's why would you want to?
Well, the reason why is because I can't address their authenticity with you, and so we can't come to a consensus on them. I believe they're more likely or not true. You believe they are, and you know more about the topic than me, so we can't really have a good discussion about it.
This is like a conversation I had on an interview, and a call called in, and he goes, "You're familiar with the work of Elizabeth Loftus?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, then you know that you cannot accept any eyewitness testimony. It's unreliable." And he just went on, and I go, "Well, I don't think that's exactly what she had in mind when she was saying that, an eyewitness, say a little old lady got mugged in the alley and someone snatched her purse, and she's in the police station with a lineup of 5 shady looking characters, and she's having trouble, reliably remembering which of them might be the one who snatched her purse, versus a well-informed, experienced outdoors person or wildlife biologist, and he sees something in the woods, and his lineup consists of a deer, an elk, a wolf, a Bigfoot, and a backpacker. I mean, it's apples to oranges."
Okay.
And let me finish.
Fair enough. Yep.
So we bantered back and forth, sparring here, and he got frustrated and said, "If there was an 800-pound gorilla out there in the woods, people would be seeing it." Well, that's where we started, wasn't it? But people are seeing it. There is evidence, but you're disallowing it. I mean, for me, the overwhelming body of data is the footprint evidence. But now you're disallowing it because...
Well, I don't mean to disallow it.
Well, I know, but when you say, then turn around and say there's no evidence, that I'm just describing the dragon that's floating in the garage. Well, no.
I meant that on the sense that...
the flower and have the footprints in the flower. So I'm one up on Carl Sagan there.
I don't know. I guess what I meant by that was the DNA and skeletal evidence. I feel like that's the moneymaker. That's the money shot.
That's why I'm telling you, I'm not trying to convince you that Bigfoot exists.
Yeah, we agree with that.
I'm just advocating the legitimacy of the search, the endeavor for it, and it's something.
And that was a thought experiment. That was not to demean you or anything. That was the comparison.
I understand.
If you let me real quick here, Jeff, just because it's about what you just mentioned. So in your example, you said like an expert hiker, somebody who would have more than average knowledge of the things in the woods, right? Picking out a lineup.
Right.
And so therefore they pick out Bigfoot. You think that's more compelling evidence, right? Do you think that's the same thing then for people who are like pilots who have expertise at picking out things in the sky, who see UFO evidence? Would you say that that's the same order of magnitude of likeliness? Like the same confidence interval?
I think that's a comparable comparison to make. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's evidence for UFOs then of the same order. Not doesn't get you any more closer. I don't know the total result, but it's the same order as a skilled hiker picking out Bigfoot. Then. Well,
sure. No, yeah. And I'm not saying this is why I'm so often mischaracterized as a pardon the analogy, but as a Bible thumping tent revivalist. That's what I'm doing at all. I get a little animated sometimes when.
No, that's no problem. The reason why I wanted to ask you the question is I wanted to see if you'd agree, because I didn't want to put words in your mouth.
Oh yeah, no, I would make that comparison, and
okay.
But my point is that yes, the acknowledgement of a novel species of relic hominoid will rise or fall on the ultimate evidence in the form of a type specimen, or perhaps, although there's no precedent for this yet, a voucher DNA specimen. Those will certainly be the conclusive turning point, the pieces of evidence.
Yeah.
But
So
short of that,
because I think my problem with footprints and photographs and stuff is they're great and they look really good, but in my mind they can be misidentifications or have a fraudulent background or whatever. I don't mean to say this. I know that there's been thousands and thousands of Bigfoot footprints found, and the thing is, they can't all be true. There's got to be hoaxes in there. Of course, there's got to be misidentifications and stuff.
Sure. Just like
I don't know, it's just hard.
Just like half of the published biomedical literature will be proven false within 20 years, as has been demonstrated by numerous studies. So
sure, but those are more on the margins, though, right? They're trying to find effects that are over, like a small N value, right? So, like, you're right. A lot of medical research will be found to be ineffectual or inaccurate.
I'm just saying that this is how science progresses by iteration, and it isn't always an all or none. And yes, there will be some chaff that has to be winnowed out. I mean, I do that. Right. I don't see that side of what I do on a daily basis.
Yeah, and that's not fair to you, right? Because you, like I said, you're by all accounts, you're a good teacher on the topics that you're an expert on, and you do work of good merit in these fields. So,
I try to work with witnesses and try to educate them as we go along, and I winnow through a lot of the misidentifications,
and I've seen you do that. To your credit, I will fully admit that you've taken evidence that I would think is of very low quality, and you would say it's very low quality. So like we wouldn't be talking to you if we didn't think that about you.
Definitely, right. I agree.
So I guess my hypothesis is that this follows what we'd expect from a mythological creature, a cultural phenomenon, right? Because the earliest stories we have of this creature happen, and it doesn't describe the same creature. So we have a 1920 story of a supernatural event of apes attacking people. And then we have...
I'm sorry. But before you continue, what I'm not aware of the supernatural events that were associated with the other than the encounter, the shooting, the rock.
So basically there was talks about seances triggering or causing or being related to these creatures that were written in the papers describing it at the time. So there was a supernatural element. I'm not saying it was necessarily a supernatural entity. Maybe it was or not in their minds, but there was a supernatural element to the story, right? And that doesn't mean that they thought that and it wasn't Bigfoot. It could have been Bigfoot if there's a Bigfoot, right? But like it's just part of the popular consciousness of the character. And then we have, of course, the stories of the first time the word Sasquatch is used. It appears to be in the record referring to a large Native American with long hair, and they were like a wild man character, right? Like, and so then we have in 1957, right? We have the really famous description by Rowe, which I think kind of shows that this is where the meme is created. And if you just give me a second to read this, it says, this is the quote by Rowe, and Rowe is not a person who we know much about. He apparently left town and wasn't analyzed. We don't even have a photo of the person. So but this is the person who creates basically the trope in my hypothesis. He says, my impression was of a young man, about 6 foot tall, almost 3 feet wide, and probably weighing somewhere near 300 pounds. It was covered from head to foot with dark brown silver-tipped hair, but as it came closer, I saw by its breasts that it was female. Its arms are much thicker than a man's arms and longer, reaching almost to its knees. Its feet were broader, more proportional than a man's, about 5 inches wide at the front, tapering much at the heels. When it walked in place of the heels 1 foot down, and I could see the gray-brown skin or hide in the soles of its feet. Then the head was higher from the back at the front. The nose was more broad and flat. The lips and chins protruded farther than its nose. But the hair then covered it, leaving bare only parts of its face around the mouth, nose, and ears, made it resemble an animal as much as a man. None of the hair, even on the back of its head, was longer than an inch, and its neck was also inhuman, thicker, shorter than any man I've ever seen. Now, see, in my mind, this creates the meme of Bigfoot, which then when we later get to the Patterson-Gimlin film, this person who we know was trying to find Bigfoot, tried to sell the idea of Bigfoot to a studio. Then he goes out and basically, and also this person who we know for a fact had a storyboard of the event, which he later filmed. Similar in nature. I'm not going to say it's the exact same. And he has plagiarized art in this book that is very similar and based on this mimetic version of this creature. Then he films that creature doing almost exactly what the meme says. And then sightings start increasing. The concept increases. You start seeing people see it in the eastern part of the United States, which I think would be much more likely and not within scope of the biological hypothesis. So I think the mythological hypothesis has a basis and has more explanatory power than the biological hypothesis.
Okay. That's an interesting scenario. Yeah.
Well, okay. So I can show this phenomenon having other explanatory power when you look at the chupacabra, right? Because a woman watched a film, she saw a description of a creature. She claims that she saw a creature, which exactly was the creature from the film, and then she told the newspaper about it. And then for the next decade or two, chupacabra sightings start popping up and down, South America. We see when King Kong was released, there was a not an actual plesiosaur, but like a pop culture version of plesiosaur in the film. And then all of a sudden, you have the Loch Ness Monster becoming very popular in Scotland. You can see this mimetic version of relict or lost creatures becoming cryptids and becoming popular, and then sightings increasing, and then people saying they find physical evidence. But, this tracks with a psychological phenomenon. So I think that has explanatory power. I guess I wonder what you say that. Obviously, you believe the footprints kind of trump that because it doesn't explain the footprints.
Right.
Because you think the footprints have novel indicators that prove they're biological. I'm suspicious of that, but we could talk about if either were true.
Sure.
So.
Sure. Well, I would not, discount aspects of what the phenomenon you have described, because and you can repeat this for other absolutely accepted biological species. I mean, if you look at the history of the discovery and an understanding of the gorilla, for example, there are remarkable parallels to some of the phenomenon that you're talking about, which it only emphasizes to me that there are parallel processes, parallel paths of human experience. The formation of memes, the influence of social media and so forth, legends, urban legends, and traditions, and so on, and the interpretation thereof have certainly influenced the way we perceive experiences, whether from a lay perspective or from a scientific. So, I mean, what you've described, I think, is quite legitimate in many aspects, but I don't think it's the sole explanation.
Yeah, I believe that you think that it lacks the explanatory power to describe the footprints, right?
Well, not only the footprints, but other aspects, hair and so forth.
So hair? What hair?
We have.
Who says it's Bigfoot hair? How do we know it's Bigfoot hair? How would I know it's Bigfoot hair?
Let me phrase it in a slightly different way. Hair, which defies attribution to any known form of wildlife, and granted, the typical standard for identification of hair is to make a positive comparison to a known sample from a known species. Mm-hmm. Since we don't have a known Sasquatch sample, the early reports resulting from requests for analysis of suspicious hair would invariably come back as indeterminate.
I know that there's been a lot of Sasquatch, Bigfoot, and Yeti hair tested in published papers over the years that have shown that almost all of them come back to be human or bear or deer. I know there was one that was odd where it was a extinct polar bear or something like that. It was closest to an extinct species
cool.
of bear. That was very cool. Yeah.
No,
I don't know. I guess
absolutely wrong. it may have sounded cool, but here's another example where
there was a second sort of review of that, or
Explanation.
a secondary study that showed that it was a little off.
it was way
but I don't
off.
know. I guess
What
it was way off.
The polar bears have nothing to do with the Himalayas or the Tibetan plateau. They evolved in the Arctic period. The comparison, the basis for that.
Wait. How do you know? Because I could tell you that the apes have nothing to do with evolving in North America, period.
No, I'm saying there's absolutely no evidence. I mean, all the evidence of polar bear genetic evolution comes from the Arctic.
I agree with you, but I also agree that
I
all
think
the
the
evidence
paper
is...
said that it might have suggested that there was. I'll have to look back. I know that it suggested that it might be.
It was Brian Sykes' paper, and the error that he made is he took a gene sequence from a 40,000-year-old jaw from northern Norway, and which was a hybrid polar bear Asian brown bear.
Right. That's
European brown bear. And because he had he found similarities to that jaw, the only similarities were between the brown bear DNA, had nothing to do with the polar bear whatsoever. And another review,
it suggested, but the attribution to a bear was correct. What you said?
Oh, it was absolutely correct.
Yeah,
well, yeah, it was
that's what I meant. Sorry,
because they pulled the hair out of a bear pelt. I mean,
there's a certain degree of error in the genetics testing, but
that ridiculous taxidermied bear in Messner's castle was a bear. And so,
what's the marquee hair then? Right, like we get one hair. We're going to put a bunch of money into it. It's the Bigfoot hair.
I'm just saying that, like we've had tons and tons of studies, but none so far have shown that the genetic evidence is supportive of a unique.
First of all, you're exaggerating. There haven't been tons and tons of studies, and the only ones that got published were ones where the result was attributable to something else.
So
and that's
all the ones where they don't fit the certain narrative are not published. They're not allowed in.
They're either not. Well, the ones that are most likely Sasquatch hair on my estimation, based on the distinctive morphology and consistent morphology across independently collected samples, which are primate by all counts. And one of the distinguishing characteristics has been the lack of a singular medulla, which means it's been very challenging to get DNA from a hair shaft without an active growing follicle or attached skin tag.
Well, I guess my question is, so like if I want to accept the hair evidence as highly as you, right? If I wanted to come to that position, I would want to see the best one, the best hair, the best result. Now, we don't have a study, but there's some result that makes you think that. What is the specific hair that I would want to look at?
No, we have a couple of dozen of samples that repeatedly illustrate a suite of characteristics that renders them indeterminate.
Indeterminate.
But consistently, I mean, the characteristics are consistent. Not the indeterminacy is consistent. They all look exactly the same under the microscope with just different phases of color depending on the proportion of eumelanin and pheomelanin pigment. Okay, so we've got these that are collected independently by different investigators, different places where Sasquatch activity has been reported, and you put them under the microscope and they look virtually indistinguishable from one another. They're all coming from something that's the same, and that something can't be attributed as any commonly known form of wildlife in North America.
And how do we determine it's not the one known ape in North America?
Human?
Yeah. So for some reason the DNA is damaged. And you can't get human DNA from them.
Your human or DNA is not present. Now, I'm going to then continue that the next that on those rare occasions when DNA has been extracted or obtained from such a hair sample, it invariably comes back as human. And it's taken as either one of two possible explanations. One, it's either contaminated through the handling of the specimen by the investigator, or two, it's simply a misidentified human hair. But there's a possibility that doesn't get identified, and that is that if we're talking about a species that is potentially more closely related to us than, say, even a chimpanzee, we may be talking about a difference of less than 1% of the DNA sequence.
So basically, in this hypothesis, you would expect Australopithecus, Gigantopithecus hairs to be misidentified some percent of the time for human hairs. Okay. So is that true? Would that be true for orangutans? What is our ability to distinguish orangutan hair from human hair, or bonobo hair from human hair?
Well, most studies of those species involve extensive DNA testing. They don't just, as has been the case with most of these, quote, Bigfoot samples, they don't simply look at one mitochondrial gene or a portion, a few thousand base pairs of one mitochondrial gene. They're looking at, we have the entire genomes for those species, and to identify the 2 to 6% difference between them.
It seems to me, the more likely explanation is that these are anomalous or damaged hairs, and we don't know what they are, more than that we do know what they are, and what they are is this thing that has this really complex hypothesis.
This study that was published by Brian Sykes, because it harps on this common theme, which you started this conversation about hair out with, and that was, so I had this conversation with him, and I offered to screen these hairs, knowing that he would get inundated with, I said, if you open the barn door, the entire barnyard's going to come in. And so I said, we suspect we're dealing with a primate. So let me help you screen these samples so that you can focus your attention on those that
the most interesting ones
may have the greatest possibilities. Yeah. If you can only do 10 or 20 or so because of your limited resources, don't on everything.
And I know that he respects your opinion. I've heard him speak on you before, and so he appreciates you doing that.
So. In this instance, he said, no. He said, we can't impose a position. So he put the barn door open, and in his publication, the entire barnyard is listed there. Except the problem was that amongst the many samples that he cited, acknowledged, were a number of samples, included some of those gold standard matching samples that I had that were sent to him.
Are any of these samples coming from the East Coast that you consider the gold standard samples?
There have been, off the top of my head, I know of a couple from East Texas.
Well, see that would begin to concern me, because now it's becoming less likely that Sasquatch is in Texas, right? But we're still getting this anomalous evidence that they're in Texas.
There's a lot of evidence to suggest that that region of East Texas, the Four Corners, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. But that's asserting a supposition. I mean, here, let's just submit it for DNA analysis. But the problem was, he didn't report any of those samples, which I suspect, and I should, I hate to talk. I'm not. Well,
we can edit that out if you don't want to.
That's okay.
No, I'm not. I just mean I don't like to speak negatively about someone who isn't no longer alive to
Understandable,
right?
But I suspect that he did not include within that paper samples that didn't yield DNA. Because and that's been our experience with numerous samples in the past. It has come back as we weren't able to get any DNA from this hair shaft. Now, here's the final point I want to make. A published study which enumerates 20 plus samples, all of which are attributed to common forms of wildlife, is a very different reported result than if he had 20 samples and 15 went to commonly reported forms of wildlife. But there were these 5 that I just couldn't get any DNA from. And when we put the microscope, all 5 of those had the exact same physical characteristics. Now, what does that mean? That would have been a very interesting result.
One thing I don't know what it means.
The fact that he did not account for all the samples that he received leaves his conclusion in serious question.
I would feel like he would. I guess he or some researchers would like to publish results like that question the norm.
Well, sure.
I don't know. I don't like the idea that there's like a a big conspiracy of people in power not hiding, but preventing certain inquiries from going forward, I guess.
Well, then how do you account for the lack of acknowledgement of the receipt? I mean, he acknowledged the receipt of those samples, not in the paper, but to the individuals who submitted them, and yet didn't show up in the study. My point is that the results as published are highly suspect because of that fact.
Okay. I guess it seems to me that you're arguing that there's a thing we don't know what it is, right?
Of course, yeah, of course you don't.
But my point is, but it is. Yeah, and that's fine. I don't expect you to.
I only presented null hypotheses. I was very careful to say here are two null hypotheses that are potentially worth considering.
I'm just trying to explain the way that I'm trying to think about your argument, right? So it seems to me like you're saying, there's this creature from Asia that came over here 200,000 years ish ago, right?
Well, that's a hypothesis too. That's the most reasonable one, but that's a hypothesis.
Yeah. So it's just one of them, right? It's a version of events is that they came over here, most likely live in the Pacific Northwest, and we can't find them for sure yet, right? We both agree with that. And then we think that they most likely live on the West Coast because it's most habitat, calorie rich, probably works better for their body type because it gets hot in certain states, right? They're large furry creatures. Like grizzly bears don't like to be in Texas, for example.
Sure.
I mean, they can be, but you don't find a grizzly bear in Texas for a reason. And then we're trying to find evidence for them, and then we find hairs that we don't know what they are, and then not all of them are in Texas. I'm not saying that, but some of them are in Texas, and they are also like hairs in places in the Northwest that we don't know what they are. And we say, well, we're going to group this category of hairs we don't know what they are. We're going to assume that they're evidence for that principle. But to me, I don't think you can say that's evidence for or against. It's just not something we know yet. It might be worth more inquiry, and you might be right that people are not putting enough resources into it. But it seems to me that doesn't help you get anywhere closer to it being anything. It's just an interesting discovery.
I'd have to disagree. But the presence, I think I was saying, the presence of hair that defies attribution. I mean, you have a physical. It's just like one of my past professors confronted me and said, well, after all, Jeff, these are just stories. And I said, well, stories that apparently shed hair, void scat, leave footprints, vocalize, are witnessed by credible witnesses, are entrenched in the culture of Native American indigenous populations. I said, it's a little more than just stories, as he would.
Has any leeway been made with the scat as far as achieving DNA from them?
Well, for example, there was one that was collected literally, proverbially, between two footprints, two very clear footprints. And unfortunately, it was not collected in a timely fashion. But we went ahead and did have it tested. And the only DNA that was extracted was dog. Now, the property owners did have a dog, and he did acknowledge that his dog had taken quite an interest and almost certainly peed on it.
Oh, crap.
But when you looked at the content, and so the on the surface, you'd think, oh, well, it was just the dog poop.
Right.
But the content was 100% well-masticated sedges. Dogs don't eat sedges. Even when they eat grass for an upset stomach, their scat is not going to consist of 100% sedge. And so it was the only other thing it could have been was a bear. But this bear then...
Yeah. So what's wrong with the bear hypothesis?
Because there were 16-inch... The best examples of 16-inch footprints showing all the Sasquatch characteristics perfectly that I've ever seen that were
suppose it's Sasquatch.
Excuse me?
Suppose it's Sasquatch characteristics, right? Because we don't have a Sasquatch. We don't know.
Right. Characteristics consistent with samples attributed to Sasquatch. Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't mean to say that to be particular, but I mean, we don't have I don't think I was thinking about this, and I thought this was somewhat of an unfair question to you, so I wasn't going to ask it, but I am going to ask it because I actually am curious. This is literally just me being curious. How would you create a falsifiable study to determine your ability to tell what would likely be a real Sasquatch footprint from one that was faked or one that would show characteristics that you could possibly misconstrue? Like how would we double blind that where we could be like, okay, these are the footprints, how are we going to know our ability? Again, this is not super a fair question. It's a little hard.
Well, yeah,
So,
you're right. And
but I was thinking about it. I just wanted to hear what you had to say.
to double blind would be certainly a challenge, but and whether something could be set up. I mean, I was put in situations like that. I don't know if you saw Les Stroud's Survivor Man Bigfoot episode where he came to my lab and he laid out on the bench in front of me 4 casts. 2 were very large, and he said one was from taken in Northern California, the other in Ontario, and then 2 smaller, which he took also in Northern California when he was out on one of his excursions, solo excursions into the field, into the bush. It was interesting because the ones that, as I looked at the 2, the one from Ontario and the one from Northern California that were about 16 inches in length, they were remarkably similar. And I said, these look very similar. Similar beyond just a superficial similarity. There's, some of the aspects of the toe shape are remarkably similar. And I said, and they look familiar to me. And I reached over. I just happened to have a cast that was had just been poured to demonstrate that procedure on camera. It was a copy of the Hereford track from Grays Harbor County, not far from you there, up on the base of the Olympic Peninsula. And I reached over and I brought that cast over and laid it down. I said, these toes look remarkably similar. And I was trying to be polite. I'm on his documentary. But
oh no!
And I said, I said there's some things I'm uncomfortable with here. I would have to look at these, consider them a bit longer. And I said, just in case someone may have been doing some copycat work here. And this little grin broke across his face, and he goes, "You're good." He said, "I'm a professional makeup artist, costume fabricator in Hollywood, a friend of mine. I gave him a copy of the Hereford cast, and he used that as the model to make fake feet that I put these footprints with."
So basically, to me, that tells me like you're definitely able to pick out a footprint that's mimicked from another specific footprint, meaning that a specific very well, right?
That's one
very versed.
And note, I've got a good eye for detail and can pick out.
And I don't doubt that for a minute, my friend. I don't. But I mean that's. I know that you're not saying this, but that's not an experiment that shows that you can pick out faked ones. It just shows that you really know your stuff about the ones you have, right? Which I would expect you to.
I have, but also other aspects. Because then here's the other side of the coin. The ones these other 2, he was very, very convinced were the real deal.
Yeah,
because he was quite certain he'd experienced something come up and approach his tent and retreat. And it left a line of footprints. Well, these prints were only about 10 and a half, 11 inches long and had all the hallmarks of a human foot. They had a well-developed arch, a well-developed ball, little toe, and lateral toes were pushed in. It was someone had doffed their shoes and braved this frosty skiff of snow and had walked across there. Under whatever circumstances he wanted to describe, it didn't change the fact that the footprints I was looking at were human, and he wouldn't have it. He said, "No, it's got to be the real thing." So,
so in that example, this eyewitness that knew what he saw, that knew a lot about the woods, was not able to determine what he saw, and his eyewitness account was not accurate or useful.
Sure,
yeah,
and that's
which I know that you think happens. I would never say otherwise. I'm just saying that when we narrow down on them, I think that it looks like a lot when it's a bunch of possible ones. Yes. I think when you analyze each one, the possible list gets really small.
It does get much smaller. You're absolutely right. And I grant you that. And
I figured you would.
The basis too. I mean, part of the basis for that is my experience with the footprints, where there are so many instances where I've had witnesses report that they had found footprints, but unless they're documented, unless they're photographed or cast, I've learned not to take their word at their description because it's very reliable.
I mean, one thing, man, I get really insecure about is like bias confirmation. Like so many things in my life I've changed my opinion on, and like I would be able to argue just countlessly about how they're right, and then eventually I change my mind, right? Like I mean, it's a lot of things, you know, and like so every time I'm really confident that I understand economics or politics or something, I'm just like, man, I'm looking for the information that makes me seem right, and I can tell you why I'm right, but it's just like there's so much uncertainty that I learn the more I learn about the natural world and history and science. I mean, do you ever get concerned that bias confirmation is making you see things in the footprints that maybe isn't there? Is that I'm not saying it's true,
Sure.
but do you ever have that insecurity?
Oh, I do. I mean, I have that sense, that feeling of obligation that I need to maybe step back and look at it fresh.
Yeah, because that would suck, right? I mean, like I'd feel bad for you.
No, if you become, like you say, you not about me knowing my stuff, and yes, I'm very familiar with the footprints in my collection. In some instances, footprints that I was uncomfortable with to begin with, over time, I become less uncomfortable with. And the question is it confirmation bias, or have I recognized some aspect that I missed? I mean, I always have to, whenever people send me footprints, unless it's really obvious, I rarely give them an opinion just right off the cuff. I'll sit and look at that, and I'll go away and I'll think about it, and I'll come back the next day and I'll open up that file, look at it again from a different perspective, and then I'll think, well, what if it was someone sent me what they thought was part of a handprint, a fingerprint on a windshield, or on the side of the car, rather, that where the oils had then subsequently been highlighted by fine road dust adhering to it. And you first looked at it, and as they thought, it looked like a very chunky, pinky finger, one that was almost twice as big as his finger alongside it. But
I got pretty fat pinky finger. I'm feeling so insecure about him now.
But there were a couple of things that just weren't comfortable. I mean, when you're familiar with enough with this, sometimes you get a gestalt impression. It just doesn't look right. And then you have to stop and think, well, now, why doesn't it look right? Well,
because basically, like Piltdown Man, right?
Right.
People were experts at telling about human. Well, obviously, we would say they're not experts, but at the time, they thought they were experts at telling human shape. Like, this totally fit into it. People said this was. Lots of people would argue with a layman or an enthusiast like me and tell me I was wrong if I doubted it. But they end up like, this was not a real good sample. They were creating models to base it on their bias and their conception. Because really smart people are really good at telling good stories to lie to themselves.
That's true.
And it's an unfortunate phenomenon, right?
Whoever hoaxed it, whoever ultimately the finger was pointed at, they knew just which bits to eliminate, which made it more ambiguous, just ambiguous enough that you could maybe convince yourself.
I mean, I don't think they were stupid for thinking that was real. It's just,
and they were wrong. Weren't given full access to it either. That was the era when fossils were personal property, and unfortunately,
well, so that brings me to I didn't want to talk too much about particular casts, but I will just about I may pronounce this wrong, but the Skookum cast, right?
The body.
So that's a cast that is owned by a private enthusiast group that people have not been given access to. I know you were given access to, but you have a modified interest in it being Bigfoot, which is not necessarily mean you're wrong or bad, but you do. I mean, I want Bigfoot to be real too, but So I mean, I agree with the motivation. But do you think that that's problematic then? Because with Piltdown Man, it's problematic that people didn't have full access to it that might be able to debate it. But here, only people that have motivated interest to talk about this cast believe it's true. I also wondered if you still believed it's true now that there's been other plausible explanations for it.
Well, we considered those plausible explanations. Right off the bat, it was one of two things. It was either an elk imprint, an elk bedding site, or it was something else. It was, it was a watch, or it was just nothing. It was
it's option 1, 2, or whatever C
exactly.
is, right?
So,
we should just, for our listeners, let's just describe what the cast, how it came to be.
Right.
If this is correct, there's basically a commercial venture by a company to look for Bigfoot.
No, it's private, just a private group.
No. This is for a television show.
Oh, there was a camera crew. Yeah, you're right. No, you're right.
Yeah, so it's a commercial interest
Yep.
by a private
Yep.
group, right? So the commercial interest hires a private group to look for Bigfoot. They go to a region in Idaho, which I've been elk hunting in. Beautiful place.
Washington.
I don't.
Washington.
It's Washington, yeah, but they leave food out, correct? I believe there are apples.
They did leave some apples. Yeah, some fruit,
Yeah.
including some apples.
And then in the morning, an individual came out to check on the apples, and then he saw an impression in the ground. And then somewhere along the line, somebody said the impression was Bigfoot, or they, suppose it's Bigfoot. I'm not saying they claim it is for sure. And then there was a cast taken of it. There was not detailed film or photos that I'm aware of it on the ground. Maybe you were aware of that.
There are.
But then the cast, there are. Okay, I have not seen them, so I'll see if I can find them. But then this cast is made, and then it is given to you and a few other people to examine.
Well, we came to it.
You came to the cast.
At the time, it was in Derek Randall's workshop. So we up there just outside of Tahuya, Washington.
Okay, and this is a quite large cast.
Yeah,
it looks like the Blob a little bit.
Yeah,
and so there was no footprints leading up to the cast, right?
No, the soil was quite dry and covered with duff.
If we looked at this video evidence that was taken, I'm not aware of it, but let's just assume it exists. I'm not saying you're lying or anything at all. I'm just saying I don't know of it. Is all. Would we see human footprints around the area with people walking around playing the thing? Were they making minor impressions on the ground?
Not unless they were within that halo.
This audio is inserted after the interview. I went back to watch the program Animal X, which is similar to In Search of or Monster Quest if you're stateside. In the video, you can see at the 7-minute and 43-second mark, there are several gentlemen standing around the cast where there's still some moist mud on the ground. You can see human footprints from their boots. So, to the question of if any humans were able to leave footprints around the general area, but not all the area, yes, they indeed could. As to my question if there's any video or photo taken of it, obviously there was a moderate quality video taken. Were there any high quality photos taken? Not to my knowledge. Also, I'd like to point out that the men examining this print did lie in and around it before taking the cast.
The question is, was it did an elk come up, nibble a bit, and just decide to, plop down in that mud, or did a Sasquatch?
So I would frame that: would a known animal who is in this region, who performs this kind of activity, leave this track, or would a hypothesized unknown animal who is not known to do this leave this track? And you believe that it's the unknown because there's really an overwhelming part of the impression that convinces you that's more likely, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And what is the impression? I'm unfamiliar with this. Is it a full body
Not a
impression?
full body, just parts of the body. What we've interpreted as the the buttock, the heel that dug in, the elbow and forearm and heel of the palm of one arm, impressing in, and so others look at that and they see the haunch of a deer of an elk. And the wrist of the forelimb in the position where we have interpreted as the heel and calcaneal tendon. So one of the first things we did was take those photographs, and Rick went to the Seattle Zoo, and I went out to our Pocatello Zoo, which actually has just not endemic, but native species. And it has a big paddock with elk, a sizable group of elk, and buffalo for that matter. And
we have beautiful elk in the Seattle Zoo. I go check them out all the time. I love that.
And I first went to the keeper and I rolled out. Rick provided me with it's about 2 foot by 2 foot color glossy photographic print of the actual imprint, not the cast, but the imprint in the ground. And showed that to the keepers, and I said, "Have you seen anything, similar to this?" They said, "Well, no, not exactly." They said it kind of looks like. I said, "Well, let's go out." So we went out and looked at some of the imprints, and yes, there are some points that bear some superficial resemblance, But what's fascinating is when you map the hair direction, the flow of the hair, when you, especially out there on the supposed wrist where the forelimb would have been folded under, the hair is running in the wrong direction, but it's running in the right direction. It's going up the lower leg towards the knee, as is typical in a primate. Plus, if you're a 500-pound elk, and you're getting up from a reclined position, you don't levitate like the dragon in the garage. You have to put your support points underneath your center of gravity.
They do it with their knees. They put like their knees down, kind of.
Pardon?
Well, they put their. I don't know if you've seen one, but like when elks get up, they kind of put their knees down and then kind of like push off of that and then put their legs down.
And then put their hooves down before they.
Sure. Okay, but what
the only hoof prints strike.
What did Bigfoot do?
Well,
I mean, when he put his foot down? I mean, I put my foot down when I jump up.
Yes, but usually you roll off of your haunch onto your feet, which are placed, at the ends of your legs, and the heels were closest to the dry part of this scene. Just the outside periphery, and so the alignment.
An Australopithecus would have really giant handprints, right? Because they would evolve from quadrupeds. Or likely evolved from quadrupeds, so they would have really large paws still at this point in their evolution. Wouldn't you expect to see large paws?
Well, there you can see the hand or the heel of the palm on the left. I think it's the left arm. Mm-hmm. So if you imagine you're down on your backside, rolling kind of onto the side of your hip, leaning on an elbow, and then with the free hand you're reaching over to the puddle, picking up the apples, biting, dropping bits of the real hard peeling, they're falling down between your legs, which is right the position that they're in relative, and were photographed in, relative to the imprint. Each time you reach across with that right arm, you're pushing with your heel. You're extending your leg, and then when it's time to get up, you just push off of that elbow and off of the heel of your palm. You don't have to put the full hand down, just fist, basically, and you roll up onto the feet on the dry part of the soil and walk away. Now, what was interesting is Rick went to the Seattle Zoo. He happened to get there just as they were feeding one of the gorillas, and they fed them a basket full of apples. Well, the female walked over there, laid down in exactly the position I described to you, and each time she reached over to the pile, she stuck in her heel into the dirt. And she then brought an apple back, took one bite out of it, dropped the peeling between her legs, set it down on her right side, and reached over for another. She was marking these apples as hers, don't take them. And the peelings accumulated down between her legs and in the area of her crotch, there between her thighs, just like in the imprint.
Do orangutans do that as well, to your knowledge?
Well, I don't think orangutans come down to the ground to eat like that. They're
well, in the Seattle Zoo, they have a spot where they actually kind of sit on the ground on these big blankets.
Sure.
They might not do that in the wild, but we're comparing a gorilla in the zoo as well. But I mean, so why compare a gorilla instead of an orangutan, since we think that this is a gigantic orangutan?
Because I don't think they're gigantic orangutans. The DNA evidence has simply shown that that's the closest sister group. It doesn't say how.
Yeah, so I meant a possible descendant. Well, yeah. I'm sorry, is what I meant to say.
But that would have they'd have to have a very different locomotor adaptation if they weigh, twice as much at least, if not more.
So do you think that's enough time for them to evolve bipedalism if they didn't have it?
Sure.
It's like 200,000 years you think would be enough? Or do you think it has to be more?
Bipedalism, bipedalism arose in the hominin fossil record, actually in the hominoid fossil record. There's now evidence, there's that, what is it called now? I can't think of the genus. There was just recently a paper.
Yeah.
There's too many monkeys and apes going around, man. Hard to keep up.
Danuvius, that was it. Danuvius. A Miocene ape that showed extreme orthograde posture in its pelvis and lower spine and long legs, relatively long legs. So, but bipedalism probably emerged very rapidly in the hominin evolution. We just, you can't look back and say, well, it took us 7 million years to evolve bipedalism. But bipedalism already existed long before we were human. and so it
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, it's a slow process that takes advancements over time in many different ways, of course.
well, sure, the mosaic process, but no, it doesn't have to be. I mean, it just depends on, again, we're talking about possible or probable. We talk about long or short. You have to define
Sure.
your.
I don't know. Like, it's to me, if this was actually a quadrupedic creature that looked like a large orangutan, like generally, obviously you would have different adaptations, but generally, it's 200,000 years in the Pleistocene era, when it had to deal with all these ice age coming and going things, developing bipedal to the extent that it's largely bipedal and not like kind of a half and half creature.
Mhm.
Like, that just seems like a lot to me. Like, it's a lot to ask. It's just more complexity. It's just like it's harder and harder to get to this. It's not that it's impossible, but it's just more and more
Take
things.
a look at if you Google bipedal gorillas, one of the examples you'll see is Ambam, a gorilla that's resident at the London Zoo who likes to walk on two legs a lot.
Yeah, and I can get bipedal bears too, which we do know exist in North America.
Yeah.
We have 100,000 bears in North America, and some of them are bipedal some of the time.
Well, I can tell the difference between a bear track and.
Oh, I believe you can. I don't know for sure if you could tell the difference between a very uncommon double strike bear print that was just anomalous, like 1 in 100,000 bear print. I think that you could tell almost every bear print from every gorilla print. I don't know if you could tell everyone.
I beg to
because
differ.
I think, yeah, I'm sure you would.
As long as it's clear and distinct. I mean, if we're
no, but that's what I'm saying. They're not all clear and distinct. A clear and distinct one, I would give you 1,000%. I would say you could. I would not doubt that. But we're not talking about clear and distinct. We're talking about ones that could, be double drops and drags and falls or swish around or slips. And those are the ones that become the outliers, which could be an explanation for the footprints.
For those footprints potentially, but then all the ones that are extremely clear, the 300 examples of which very, very few are obvious hoaxes.
But some of them are obvious hoaxes to me that you don't believe are obvious hoaxes. So, like, for example, we know for a fact that the person who left the I don't really like the term, but the cripple foot one, right? Like, we know for a fact the man who brought it to us was a faker. Not saying necessarily he faked this.
Okay,
but he is a charlatan, right?
Yeah, yes, he was. Ivan Marks was guilty of hoaxing things. If you are familiar with any of his attempts at hoaxing, to equate those with the anatomical detail, these.
Hold on, I want you to get to this, but just if I could just finish the. Yeah. So my point is, so we have some that are possible, some that are probable, some maybe could be bears, some you just think are certainly not bears, right? And then we have one that you think is really good, certainly not a bear. I'm saying that I don't know what it is, and I can't really argue about the atomic features, but I do know that the source we got it from was from a dirty filter. This person is known to be interested in hoaxing Bigfoot, did attempt to hoax Bigfoot several different times. And then we have a footprint. We don't have a train of footprints. The reason why we don't have a trail of footprints is because they're there's a river, there's a train track, just like we don't have a trail of footprints from the cast we talked about before because, they're this reason or that reason. So it just seems like, why are all these explanations of why the evidence could be better always it's not better? And I feel like that's problematic.
Well, sure. Yeah, there are. It's not all clean and pristine. You're right. But Ivan Marks wasn't the sole person involved with this. He was there at the same time with Rene de Hinden when these were discovered.
Well, he could have been. If he faked it, he's the sole person, right? And that hypothesis is true. If he faked it, he could have been the sole person.
Yeah, but then I come back to that point that if you compare the quality of his attempted fakes, so I mean it just speaks to the quality. If you go watch the floppy costume white Sasquatch that Ivan Marks tried to foist on the public, compared to this, there's just no comparison. So I mean, it's like they say, even if these were discovered by Ivan rather than Rene on this occasion, as they say, even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while.
Well, and even a bad hoaxer makes a good hoax once in a while.
Well, fine, yeah, well.
Let me make it like an analogy. So, like, I used to sell trade collector cards a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was an expert in it, and like an actual, like, you don't get a degree, but I'm an expert in it. I made a lot of money selling a trade. I could tell fake cards. Like, almost no one can do it. You need to know the ink and all this stuff, right? Same stuff that you know about the footprints. Just a bunch of jargon and nuance that only nerdy people would care about. So if you tell me, like, oh, this card is from a fake pack, and I look at it, I'm like, well, this is a real card. I can tell it's a real card. I can see why you would say that. But if I didn't see the pack opened and you told me it was from a real pack, and I don't have this provenance, that's prestige of the source of it, I would then doubt my ability to tell if it was fake and think that I'm either missing something or that it's an especially good fake. Or to a certain degree, it would lower my confidence 30 or 40% or whatever. I wouldn't not let the provenance affect it, because the provenance is really important. I mean, like, in archaeology, like, everything that's around the thing is hugely important to determining what it is, right? Like, it's a huge deal. But it seems to me that you don't value that stuff as much. You think that the footprint in and of itself is like the best primary evidence, and all the provenance around it isn't quite as important.
Well, I certainly, I think, would prioritize and scale the impact. I think ultimately, though, it is the evidence of the footprint itself, the prima facie evidence, and the contextual is absolutely important. And certainly, I rely on those kinds of things, and the consistency and correlation with other subtleties, jargon and subtleties, as you point out, that point to consistencies that, in many instances, a potential hoaxer would be very, very unlikely to be aware of. To expect them to incorporate those kinds of functional details. And
a lot of people that make fake cards do not get all the stuff right. They often get it wrong.
Yeah.
Like, I do agree with you. Okay. People do make fake dollar bills, though, and they do get away with it.
Right. Oh, sure.
And that has a level of scrutiny higher than either of these topics, because we're talking money, right? Like the state itself is interested, because it's a fiat currency. It's like one of their primary concerns. And fake money gets made.
Sure.
So, I mean, I don't know. Let's say I don't know your level of confidence that the footprint's real. Would you mind giving me a number? I know it's kind of fuzzy, but if you wouldn't mind.
Well, when you say the footprints, so
I'm sorry, by the cripple footprint.
Oh, the cripple footprints. Oh, yeah. I would be, in the high 90s at least.
Okay. So what percentage, like, if you knew for 100% fact that the guy who made it is a faker, it doesn't necessarily mean it's fake. How much does that affect that then? Is that 5%?
The guy 10%? Who made it, the guy who poured the.
Well, I'm sorry. I should not have said made it. That was biased. You're right. I should have said the guy who said, "Hey, look, a footprint."
Yeah.
Right.
It gives me pause. Certainly gives me pause to consider it. But like I said, in this particular case,
give me a number, man. I just want to hear a number.
Oh, a number?
Yeah. So, like, does the fact that a charlatan points at the footprint that otherwise seems real to you, does that affect it? 10%, 20%, 5%? Like, what's the rate?
I can't put a number on it, like cost on most people. Now,
I could admit that it is, like, reasonable for you to believe in Bigfoot and not reasonable for me to believe in Bigfoot. Like, that's possible, Yeah. Because, like, based on the evidence that I see, it seems to me people are saying these footprints are zebras and not horses. And they're in Texas. I'm just like, they're horses, right?
How would you feel if an eDNA study was tested in the Pacific Northwest in search of primate DNA, unknown primate DNA, and the results came back that they weren't able to find any unknown primate DNA? Would that impact your views at all? Or
oh, sure, it would. I mean, it's a poor piece of evidence. It isn't necessarily. The lack of evidence isn't necessarily evidence of the absence of said.
It can be, but not necessarily.
Exactly, not necessarily. Yeah. So it would be another very big and heavy weight on the scale, or piece of the puzzle.
I'd say maybe an apologist way to say that is the reason why I think DNA is so DNA and skeletons are held skeptics hold so hardly to them is that it's one of those things that it's so difficult to, I guess, fake. I guess.
Well, sure, yeah.
It's very hard
black
to
or white,
fake
isn't
DNA.
it? It's
Yeah.
easy. That doesn't take any work. I mean, if someone
Yeah.
comes in with a skull, it's a game over. It's done. The story's told.
But that's like why we have the Gigantopithecus blackie hypothesis, right? Because somebody wanted a holotype, and so they said, "Okay, that's my holotype."
Well, not originally. I think John Green was motivated out of, establishing a context, because people were asking, well, what in the
But didn't he try to name it, and they told him he couldn't name it unless he had a holotype?
That was Grover Krantz.
Oh, Grover Krantz. That's
Grover
correct. You're right.
Krantz. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
and he did. He got out into the weeds when he suggested that a new species could be recognized on the basis of the footprints alone. It can't. But
yeah, and I give you credit for saying that, because like I said, the footprints I think don't get us there, but you think they're very compelling. I think they're not very compelling, but I do appreciate the research into them. I do.
Yes. Are there any people in your field, Jeff, that are experts in footprints that disagree with you by any chance?
Oh, sure, of course. You wouldn't expect it to be otherwise.
Yeah. I guess there's always variation.
But there are also others who, behind closed doors, are quite intrigued and quite enthusiastic supporters of what.
I guess it kind of makes it hard. So, like, if this was a different subject, right? We're saying, are there any red birds left, or are all the birds blue? And all the, bird color experts are like, well, it seems they're all blue. And one says, well, I know about a particular part of bird feathers more than anybody else, and I say that there's a red bird, and it's for a very good reason. But all the other bird color experts are like, well, we all think it's blue. Like, how could a person listening to this debate agree with the red bird hypothesis?
Well, if you're painting that as an analogy of what I just described, I think that's a little unfair, because I'm not the only voice. I'm not the lone voice crying in the wilderness. Well,
you're not the only person saying it's real. I mean, out of footprint experts.
Excuse me.
No.
Yes, there are others who are very sympathetic. For all the reasons we talked about at the beginning.
Yeah.
I'm one of the few who was, whether you want to call it naive enough or idealistic enough, to forge after a scientific question on its merits in spite of preconception, and nearly cost me my job. It nearly cost me my job. And others, having seen the grief heaped upon me, are much less likely, especially before reaching job security and tenure, and they are more conservative in their public pronouncements. But behind the scenes, I have lots of interactions with people who are very intrigued and very sympathetic and very encouraging to keep at it.
It seems like in your experience, there's a Bigfoot stigma, where people hear in academia or in science, they hear Bigfoot and they kind of keep quiet on it. Or
is that?
Is that accurate? Yeah.
Absolutely. So do you think if this not like a hard conspiracy, but the soft conspiracy against this conspiracy of quiet, do you think that this wasn't there, that the evidence would be much more compelling?
Well, no. Okay. The nature of the evidence wouldn't change. The open-mindedness or the objectivity of the viewers of the evidence might change. Yeah.
We ran a very non-scientific poll on Twitter. So the data means who knows what. But we just asked our listeners what their confidence level was in Bigfoot possibly existing. I thought you'd like to hear the results. So 10+% was the highest mark someone could vote, which got 10.1%. 5% got 5.6%. 1% or approaching 1% was 23%, and then approaching 0 was 61.3%. So it seems like the confidence interval was pretty low, but there was more 5s than 10+. I mean, more 10+s than 5. So you do got some people in the 10+s, I imagine. You're in the 90+ level. That's where you're in. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I based on the evidence I've engaged. Yeah, I'm up there. It's but then again, the way the question is worded. See, again, it's either or. I mean, the probability that Sasquatch exists. But it'd be interesting if you ran another poll and asked the question, how, where do you place your percentage for the how reasonable is it, or how much effort should we put into continued investigation?
I think you get a lot of support because, I mean, we wouldn't be talking to you if we didn't value your research. For
Yeah, I think so too.
See, well, sure, but I mean, that's the point that I tried to make, where I'm not trying to make an argument to convince people solely on the evidence at hand that this creature exists or this species exists. I'm saying, on the basis of the evidence at hand, we should be pursuing this investigation. We shouldn't throw this out arbitrarily.
I would say we haven't thrown it out arbitrarily. There's been 50 years, and resources put into it, not to the level that you would like, but not even non-scientific. There's been private, people paying for hunters and paying for people to go into the woods, or there's been, for-profit enterprises doing this a lot, and they just have nothing that has convinced the greater scientific community. But I think that you would see a lot of support for continued research. Again, I don't think I'd have a Loch Ness Monster person on the podcast, even though that's my favorite monster. I want him to be true so much. I'm very biased towards it, but I just think it's gee. But I think Bigfoot is an order of magnitude more likely than the Loch Ness Monster. But I think they're both approaching zero, sadly. I don't want to say that, that's what I think. That just seems to me the more likely thing, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that I think the world is getting smaller, and it's getting harder there's less places for unknown species to hide, I guess. Is my opinion, but I might be wrong. I could be wrong.
Yeah, it's fine. Okay, so can I ask? This is not an area of your expertise, but it's on topic. There's a certain Native American story that I see used as evidence, right? And you used that as evidence specifically a couple times, but in your one story, oh, well, we would have seen them, and you say, well, there's scat footprint stories, right? So it's a part of your packet of evidence is the story about the hairy man, right? Well, right. No, so with the pictographs, yeah.
Just to note, like I said before, this is a very long interview that has been heavily edited from its original 4-hour version. There was a part while Jeff was speaking about Native American stories where he referenced the hairy man as positive evidence. So that's why I bring it up back here again.
And so the story that I forget the lady's name, which I really apologize for. I should have written it down. Yeah, thank you. So she wrote about this kind of creation myth, and she calls it the hairy man, right? Well, I read her thing. I looked at her primary source. I have it right in front of me, and literally her primary source says it's a grizzly bear, and quotes the grizzly bear saying people should be able to stand on their hind legs like me, and they should have no tail. She has that exact same quote in her source, but she says the hairy man says that. And so I wondered if you accepted the evidence that I said, if you looked at it, would you no longer use that story? Or do you think that she's right that they didn't mean grizzly bear and they meant Bigfoot? I just wonder, because it just seemed like a known anecdote that was wrong that I saw. And so I'm not trying to gotcha you. I was just wondering, would you be susceptible to no longer using that anecdote?
No. I'll go look at the primary source and see what that says. But others, I mean, her paper that's published in the Relic Hominoid Inquiry went out to several cultural anthropologists who reviewed it, and nobody raised the point that you've just raised. So yours is the first, and I've read
it's a beautiful creation mythology. I really like it. And the pictographs themselves are just fantastic. It just shows the creativity and just the beautiful storytelling of all these different diverse groups that were in the Americas at the time. That's neither here nor there, but that's a level of interest to me, and I just want to give them a shout out. So this recording was made after the interview. I just wanted to make a note. While it's true that Western anthropologists might bring a different perspective to analyzing or cataloging Native American stories, it is vitally important to also get the perspective of the stories from the people that inherited those stories, to seek out those groups and see how they still tell them. There's a very rich culture of many different groups in North America that have absolutely fantastic mythologies, creation myths, characters, fables, art. And when we try to retrofit that art, sometimes we can make it lose its uniqueness to make it fit more Western style storytelling. And so if you can, please try to look at original sources from Native American group. Yeah, I just really, man, I want to thank you coming on the show. Like this is a really long conversation, and obviously there's some things we really disagree about. There's some things we really agree about. But one thing I really respect is your like dedication and seriousness, and your willingness to talk to people who disagree with you. And like sometimes you have to say, well, like I don't think you're right, and that can be kind of cagey or emotional. But I think you're a really honest and good person, and easy to talk with about this stuff. So.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree. I really appreciate you talking with us, and I know it's kind of, I don't like. I'm always nervous whenever I disagree with people, but at the end of the day, we're still friends, and we still really respect you, man.
Well, sure, yeah. As long as everyone can be reasonable and acknowledge other points of view for the merits that they are based upon, then yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to add, my man? We want to make sure that you feel fairly represented on the podcast.
No. That was a wide-ranging conversation, and ups and downs, and back and forths and around.
Yeah. Well, we took about 3 hours of your time, and that's very gracious of you.
Thank you so much.
Really,
I hope it was worthwhile.
It was awesome.
Oh yeah, definitely. We are very happy to have you on, and we really appreciate it. And wish you all the best, and enjoy the sun up here in the Northwest while we have it.
Sorry about the technical.
That's okay.
No worries.
I'm sure the Bigfoots will be sweating it out.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
All right. You have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.